Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast, Linking the Chain. I'm Chris Scantlebury, the co-founder of ProConvey, and today we're talking about what actually drives better property transactions, all the way from instruction straight through to completion, and have a look at what separates agents who consistently get deals over the line from those who just typically agree sales and then, hope for the best. So I'm pleasantly, I'm happy to be joined by Charlie Carr from EXP UK. Charlie runs his own independent agency business. He works very closely with his clients and he focuses heavily on seeing those transactions go through properly, not just getting the property sold, but actually getting it sold and then completed. So, Charlie, thanks for joining me.
Mate, thanks for having me. It's fun to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, Charlie, before we get into the details around, EXP, the fast track sale and stuff we're here to talk about, can you mind just telling everyone a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, as Chris said, I've been running my own agency for a while now. Been self-employed since 2023. Been in the industry for about 16 years. I very early on, I knew my focus was mainly on the service rather than the listing numbers. So I wanted kind of personal service from that very kind of brief introduction in terms of a lead right through to congratulations, you've now completed on the house sale. So I'm based in Exmouth and Devon, and I cover that area as well as the surrounding areas. I'm very fortunate. My business is mainly repeat business, off-market deals, kind of referrals, and again, working on a quality rather than a quantity kind of business base, really. So I'm not going to list loads and loads of properties at the same time. I'm going to have those fewer but more kind of a special relationship between my buyers, and that's what brings people back.
Yeah.
And that's the whole kind of premise of my business, really, and that's what I've done from day one.
I think that's the difference in the independent agents compared to the national branches is that, isn't it? You can provide that personal customer service to your clients and
Yeah,
not necessarily just a numbers game when you're doing it for yourself, like where there's these bigger firms are just all they care about is the bottom line, customer
100%.
experience.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting. Obviously, well done. Congratulations. I know how hard it is to start a business, and I wish you every success. I'm always interested in what other people are doing when they're running their businesses. So you're running your own agency day to day now. What's actually harder now than it was, let's say, 10 years ago?
Mm, I mean, apart from the industry as a whole,
Yeah.
that changes all the time. But I think tech is one of those things where it's done a lot for us, but it's also made us a lot more needy in terms of our expectations. And that's not just from sellers' point of view. That's from me from a consumer point of view. We live in an instant world, you can get next day delivery. And, so clients now want that speed of service. They want the constant updates. They want instant answers, which is absolutely fair enough. But when we're doing all of that, plus, the compliance is changing and, the material information is a lot more than it used to be. And ID checks are a lot more in depth than they used to be. All of those things add more and more pressure. So as an agent, whether you're in high street, independent or corporate or anything like that, you're going to be feeling those pressures to balance that service, the compliance, the getting the right offer, making sure that that's progressing and making sure everybody is moving forward and updated all at the same time.
That's right. Yeah, I think I found that during my brief period of conveyancing, well, a decade, it was the conveyancers telling me oh, it never used to be like this. And the world
Yeah,
just kind of changed, let's say 10, 15 years ago, where everyone had a
yeah,
mobile phone, everyone can connect to you. And it just, I think it comes down to managing expectations as well of the clients and just making sure they understand the process, because it isn't something that people do all the time. So I think it's just managing their expectations and making sure you can connect with them in a way that gives them updates without being hassled, like a communication device.
yeah,
Is something. So
yeah, 100%.
brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. I guess when you're for you, when you're at evaluation at the moment and someone's asking you to sell their property, what do you think wins that instruction for you? How do you How do you go about that?
It's a tricky one. It does depend on the seller's motivation, but I think whether they are motivated by kind of price or by fee, that's something that every agent will come across. I think the typical high street agent either kind of races to the bottom of fee or overpromises on price. So,
Mhm.
but the way the independent model works, and I think the reason why it's blown up so much is because we are all about that that service element. So we like to build that trust. We like to be very, very clear. Anyone can say your house is worth more than it is. Anyone can say, "Oh, yeah, we market, we go on Rightmove and all those kind of places." But from a seller in their living room, they hear the same pitch over and over and over again. We'll put it on our socials, we'll do this and we'll do that.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? So what I like to do is go into strategy really, really clearly, and saying that, I've been in it 16 years. I've seen loads of different types of markets and I've created strategies for those markets. So being able to explain that process properly, what
Yeah.
goes wrong, how you manage it, what steps you've got in place and what triggers you've got in place to go, there's a risk and that risk is getting greater and greater and greater. When do we jump in to mitigate that risk?
Yeah.
What do we do from the very beginning, and all that kind of structure that's behind it. If you can show that, not just
Yeah.
as we're going to put a lovely little board outside so all your neighbours know you're on there, and then they're all going to go on Rightmove and have a little nose that you're decorating. That's great. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you're not giving any confidence with that. You're just saying, well, I'm going to do the bare minimum, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah. Yeah.
what you would do. That's just like going into a shop and saying there's going to be something for sale. So
Hmm.
I think by being able to make sure that you can show them that process and that whole structure, that gives them that confidence. And then the confidence, gets that trust. And that's
Yeah.
what gets you instructions in my eyes.
Completely, yeah. I think you've got to manage the clients again, expectations, let them know what could go wrong, how you're going to manage it, and just
Yeah.
talking through that process with them. Then I'm sure gives them the confidence that you've been here and done it. You've seen the pitfalls, you've seen where the transactions could fall down, and kind of mitigate that for them. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I wanted to lead into in the next question. Really was like, in your experience,
Mm,
where you think the transactions usually start to wobble? Obviously, fall through rates are super high in this country, as we know.
yeah.
What's the main reason, do you think, for that? Where do you see the transactions failing?
Um, Sounds a bit of a cliche, but that information, that communication is absolutely crucial. A lot of people will quickly blame price, and that is a factor, of course. But it's actually not the biggest one. The biggest one is that information or misinformation. So that could be, something comes up in the searches, there's a missing document, which you could have had solved, a query that someone hasn't anticipated, but because it appears late, and it's not the fact that it's appeared, that's not an issue, that's
Mhm.
easily solved, but because of the timing, um, that's
Yeah,
when it causes the issue. So because it appears late, everyone goes, "Oh my God," and you're like, "Chill, this is it's absolutely fine," you know.
yeah,
I particularly like to work with my clients, and like as you know, working with me now, we do everything at the beginning right, and that's what your software has proven to work, because you
mhm,
put in that foot then
yeah.
just causes so much more
That's it.
ease later.
Yeah, if the missing information that comes out, I think people underestimate what we are trying to solve with that. It's not always that the issue that comes out necessarily kills the deal. It is the
Yeah,
surprise. It's
yeah,
that the seller didn't know about this, particularly at the
yeah,
time when the buyer, sorry, when they bought the property, and it just shakes the confidence. And once that
yeah,
confidence goes in one transaction, potentially even in a chain, then it's all just
mm,
fragile. What we've seen is, both from working with the agents and like through with the MPTN, is that when the sellers are prepared earlier, when you've got that ID, that material information, title documents, searches, all handled up front, those kind of wobbles, they don't disappear. They're just managed
mm,
differently. They're managed
yeah,
earlier. They're expected, and they don't
yeah,
derail the transaction in the same way. And
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Do you agree?
yeah, mate, 100%. And I think it's one of those, if and again, it goes back to that communication, but when the buyer is making a very, very well informed decision, they know all of that information up front, as you know, the pull through rate is so
Yeah.
significantly reduced that
Mhm.
it's nearly not there. Unfortunately, it's still there a bit, but it's dramatically reduced. So I think just having all of that info is
Mhm.
crucial to anyone that wants to be really successful rather than just being an agent.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
and that leads me directly into talking about our fast track sale, and I will just reel off some of the stats as you brought it up. So yeah,
yeah,
the fast track sales reduce fall throughs by 45%. So imagine your pipeline if you're doing 10 cases a month, and 45% of them could actually get sold, and you could get the revenue for that. It's some of the firms we worked it out, you could be saving on average like £66,000 a year just from using the product and getting the clients ready earlier. So it really is really is a change in the way that transactions will be done, I think.
mhm,
And you were already using ProConvey before we launched the fast track sale, and
yeah.
did that already making a difference to the way you run your cases?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've loved it since I've kind of learned about it. So it brings that structure in, right? And again, we work very similarly, so it makes sense because it's bringing the structure from the start of the transaction. So um, when a seller is deciding to sell, they're in a very specific frame of mind, right? They're in a I need to upload my ID. I need to give them all the information about the property and then if it's leasehold, freehold, all that kind of stuff. They need to give you everything. So whilst they're in that frame of mind, why not get everything
Yeah,
and load it into the system? Because then instead of they've loaded it all in their mind, that's done. And then the bit that everybody sees as selling the house, the viewings happen, and then we get offers and we start negotiating that. But then as
yeah,
soon as we go sole subject to contract, we go, right, okay, no one needs your ID again. And they go, well, I've already done that.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like that it's mad. It's absolutely mad.
It,
But I think when I came down to Plymouth to see you and Matthew, he nipped it in the bud and he said, we've got such an archaic system because our housing is so old. We're such an old country. We've got such an
yeah,
old record keeping system.
yeah,
And that's why it's so segmented and everybody's doing their one thing, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
what you guys have done is been able to join it and we're putting
Hmm.
so much structure into that front. It
Yeah,
just removes so much chaos. And and then the
that's the
clients go
point.
in,
Yeah.
this is great because it's fun rather than stressful.
Right, yeah, that's it. And then they just do it once at the start and then they're kind of left, right? The transaction's being handled rather than
Exactly.
having this. Like for us, I think I get it quite a lot that, onboarding is not going to solve conveyancing. And it's like, I'm not pretending it does. It's just
Yep.
every transaction, these things need to be done. So it's about starting from a position of strength rather than
Mm.
trying to scramble around to get all of this stuff done. Once the clock starts ticking, which is really once a sale's agreed, So we believe that when the fundamentals, which are like ID, material information, title document, when they're all handled early, the whole tone of the transaction changes. Actually, it becomes more structured. Instead of reacting to things, you are the one pushing the pipeline, and it really does make a huge difference. And you would know yourself because you ran the very first fast track sale case through the MPTN
Yeah.
integration. And, yeah, what made you take that step, and how has it been for your clients?
So the clients are loving it. And again, it's one of those things at the moment because we're not sold subject to contract, they're not even seeing the real benefit yet. And
Yeah.
they're not even seeing the full wow factor. And
Mhm.
already they're going, so what else do we need to do? And I'm like, no, you're good. You are now sale ready, right? And that's the key. You are sale ready. And I like it because I don't then have to chase the things that aren't there by conveyancers and stuff because
Yeah.
there's actual movement when it happens.
Mhm.
So I think having it historically, you would have anything from kind of you'd have some information emails, you'd have ID documents, and then you'd have PDFs of this, and then it would be so segmented, and you'd be kind of it was the risk of losing stuff as well was much greater, right? Whereas so this
Yeah.
is much safer, which is
Yeah.
perfect. It gives such more confidence with the sellers and the buyers. But what I also like is that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. So again, historically, you would be the sellers would be like, well, no, we're at this position, aren't we? And the conveyancers would be like, no, we're at this position. And you're like, well, hang on, where are we? So
Mhm.
with what you guys have put in with the fast track, it's just completely changed it. Everyone's connected. We're all on the structured system. The seller does their ID, material information forms. It's visible, so the conveyancer isn't starting from that 0 point. It starts without a chase, which is what we used to have to. We
Yeah,
had to
completely.
start
I
it by
think that's
chasing,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So
that you're saying.
it's
I think contrast with how it used to be done it is pretty stark with when you're using a fast track. Like I remember traditionally it was, sales agreed, then you're sending out a referral, then you're chasing that referral to see which kind of conveyancer the client's gone with. Then you're waiting for the onboarding to be done, chasing ID, waiting for a contract back to be created, and everyone's operating in their own siloed systems. And
yeah,
so what we're trying to do with Fast Track is just bring all of that together into one tidy, shared, structured workflow. It's going to remove the fragmentation, those early calls, that early kind of um, what should I say here? That early those early unknowns.
yeah,
Ryan will clip all this in. It's fine. Yeah, those early unknowns. And instead of then scrambling once the sale's agreed, you're starting again. I keep saying it, but from that position of organization, and it's going to be a very different feeling for the agents and the clients that end up referring the cases through ProConvey.
yeah,
And you mentioned, I did want to bring one thing up. You mentioned the sale chasing side, because I know every agent has that, that role to play. And how
yeah.
has this your relationship with the conveyancers?
Mate, we used to, if we're honest, everyone used to blame each other, right? So the agent would be like, oh, it's not us, it's conveyancers, and conveyancers would say it's not us, it's your agent, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
we are literally working together, it's a complete night and day situation. So again, usually we would almost instruct them by chasing them to say, right, has your onboarding gone out? Has your ID come back? And they go,
Hmm.
no, of course it hasn't.
Yeah,
You sent this through yesterday. What are you talking about?
yeah,
Because again, that seller is out of that frame of mind. They've done it. So
yeah,
there's no urgency. So having everything done, it's instead of chasing for progress, you're then saying, right, okay, what is the next stage? It's actual legal movement instead of just going, have you got your photo ID? That's
yeah.
such a waste of time, right? And it
Hmm.
makes everybody work a lot nicer together. So we're collaborating. We're not just kind of picking up the phone because we've been chased, because
Yeah,
we couldn't see anything, whereas now we can see everything. So
yeah,
it's just a lot of that unnecessary friction between the conveyancers and the agents is just gone.
yeah,
I
yeah. I
I
think it
can't recommend it
changes.
enough.
Thank you very much, mate. Yeah, I think and that's the thing. It changes the dynamic of the transaction completely. It is a really important distinction that when everyone starts from the same place, being the sellers, buyers, and the solicitors and the agents, it really is like a no longer, okay, are we ready to begin this transaction? It's like, guys,
Um,
we're ready. How do we move this forward?
yeah,
It's just build
yeah,
trust between the agents, the lawyers, confidence with your clients, and I think that. What another thing it does, which is really important, is it actually creates momentum in the transactions rather than friction, and that's really what it's about. It's about
yeah,
starting off the transactions in just the best way possible.
yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, thanks. And so you've been using it. Obviously, there's lots of agents in the country that are using it and referring through to our lawyers. But is there anything that, if I can ask you for a soundbite here, you would say to agents who aren't currently, doing this way on ProConvey and are still using that manual system?
Ooh, apart from just sign up, just sign up.
All right.
You'll be thankful. But um, if what I would say is, if you have a look at your average transaction, right? Say the first 3 weeks, how much of your time is wasted? And what I mean by that is how much time you spent chasing IDs, chasing forms, chasing solicitors for updates that just don't exist because nothing's actually started. Imagine if all of that was gone because everything was there, and you
Mhm.
can then move from that. If you move that information gathering and admin to the beginning where they're already in that headspace, when they're uploading their documents, and it's not much more at that point because they're already doing those necessary things to get it to the market anyway. So you're not actually creating more work. You're moving it from here to the very beginning, which is
Yeah.
freeing you up here. So that reduces your stress. That makes you look more organized. You're able to say to your sellers, we can get this through quicker because you're
Mhm.
sale ready, you know?
Yeah.
So you don't get those why hasn't this happened conversations. You get a lot more control over your pipeline, which is, as a business owner, you need to know what's coming in. You need to know your pipeline. And it's about being that organization rather than focus on being high street or independent or hybrid. Be the organized agent, and
Yeah.
let that be your brand. And I promise you, your clients will notice it.
And that's it. The amount of time that I spend just telling agents what's going on with the clients, like it seems so obvious what we've built, right? That just the
Yeah.
agent can see progress of the client through the transaction, rather than picking up the phone and giving everyone a shared workspace. I think, like you said at the start, it's like cats and dogs. France and England, the conveyancing and agent relationship, right? They're always at each other. And I think,
So true.
yeah, the reality of it is, we all want the same thing here. We want this
Yeah.
transaction to go through, reduce fall throughs, and get it through as quickly as possible. So
Yeah.
ProConvey allows you to work together in that way with your seller, so that like I say again, you're trying to move the transaction forward rather than dealing with getting the admin ready at the start of it. Okay, yeah, no, I agree completely, Charlie. And then if we're looking back a bit ahead in the industry, where do you see the industry in a few years? Where do you think it's heading?
Think it's probably just going to get. It's just going to head towards more of the transparency, the preparation. No one wants that kind of cloaks and dagger anymore. No one wants that mystery. They want to
Yeah.
feel like their transaction is being handled, not that it just disappears into like a black hole once the offer is accepted. They want that visibility. They want the updates. Again, we're in an instant world, so they want to know things are actually moving and they want it in real time.
Yeah.
And I think the agents and the conveyancers who adapt to this, who build processes that are structured and that are transparent, and those are the ones that are going to stand out. It's not,
Yeah.
if you don't, it's like anything, adapt or get left behind, right?
Absolutely. That's the point. I think for years the industry has just accepted that delays and fall throughs are normal. But actually, if you look at the data, most delays aren't because of legal complexity. They are because of administrative delays. They're caused by information not being ready when the process begins. Agents
Yeah.
and lawyers start collaborating later on when the seller's finally found a buyer, and then the timeline changes slightly. And that's what initiatives like what we're doing with Fast Track Sale and the MPTN are really about. It's not in any way about replacing professionals and the job they're doing. It's just giving them better tools to do what they already do, but just faster and with less friction. That's all we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so, Charlie, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I loved it. Anytime.
Well, thank you again for everyone to listening to Linking the Chain. This is episode 2. And as always, if you're an agent interested in seeing how the fast track sale works in practice, how ProConvey is helping to prepare sellers earlier, keep your transactions organized, feel free to get in touch. But until next time, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.